The day humanity chose not to fight back was the day we truly became dangerous. Admiral James Cooper stood at the United Nations podium, his weathered hands gripping its edges, as he addressed not just the assembly before him, but the entire human race watching through their screens. Through the grand windows of the UN chamber, delegates could see the strange shadows cast by the alien warships hanging in low orbit. Massive vessels that blotted out patches of sunlight like artificial eclipses. Above Earth's atmosphere, 10,000 Caraxian warships held position, their weapon systems primed and ready. The Caraxian armada had arrived without warning 3 days ago, their message simple and direct: surrender or be annihilated. The chamber's climate control struggled to keep up with the nervous energy radiating from the assembled representatives. Cooper could see the sweat on their faces, the trembling hands, the barely contained panic. These were people who had spent their careers navigating diplomatic crises, but nothing had prepared them for this. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cooper began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "As Supreme Commander of Earth's Combined Defense Forces, I am hereby ordering all military personnel to stand down. No defensive measures are to be taken. No weapons are to be raised. We will not fire a single shot." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting accusations of cowardice and treason. The Chinese representative had to be physically restrained by his aides. The Russian delegation stormed out, only to return moments later when they realized there was nowhere else to go. Cooper waited patiently for the disorder to subside, his expression unchanged. He knew what they were thinking, that he had lost his mind, that the pressure had finally broken him. After all, he was the man who had spent the last 15 years building Earth's planetary defense network. Now he was ordering it to remain dormant in the face of invasion. General Marcus Chen, Cooper's longtime friend and second-in-command, stood quietly in the wings of the stage. He alone knew the full scope of what was about to unfold. He watched as Cooper maintained his composure, remembering their conversation from the night before. "It's going to be chaos, James," Chen had said, pouring them both a drink in Cooper's office. "They'll think we've gone mad." Cooper had smiled then, the same quiet, confident smile he wore now. "That's exactly what we need them to think. More importantly, it's what we need the Caraxians to think." In orbit, Supreme Commander Theron of the Caraxian fleet watched the proceedings with growing unease. The humans' response defied every strategic simulation his military had run. Where was the resistance? Where was the desperate last stand? His antenna twitched as he studied the readings from his sensors again. The bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn, was unnaturally quiet. The normal buzz of activity had been replaced by a tense silence as his crew tried to make sense of the situation. Theron's copper-colored scales bristled as he paced the command deck. "Status report," he barked to his bridge crew. "Status report." Lieutenant Cax, his sensor officer, quickly responded, "Sir, Earth's missile silos remain inactive. Their orbital defense platforms are powered down. Military installations worldwide are standing down as ordered. They're actually doing nothing." "That's impossible," muttered Commander Voss, Theron's second-in-command. "Check the deep scans. They must be hiding something." "Already done, sir," Cax replied. "Multiple passes with all scanning frequencies. If they're hiding anything, it's beyond our ability to detect." Theron's scales bristled. In 300 years of expansion, the Caraxian Empire had never encountered a species that simply refused to defend itself. It went against every principle of evolutionary survival. His own military training rebelled against the very concept. Even prey species fought back when cornered. "Supreme Commander," Voss said, mandibles clicking nervously, as he approached Theron's command station. "This has to be a trap. No species would simply accept extinction. They must have some hidden defense system we haven't detected." Theron's own instincts screamed the same warning, but their scans had been thorough. Earth's military capabilities were precisely what intelligence had reported, significant but ultimately no match for a Caraxian armada. Yet something about this situation felt wrong on a fundamental level. He thought back to the briefings he'd received before the invasion. Earth was a Class 3 civilization, technically capable of interstellar travel, but limited to their own solar system. Their weapons were primitive by Caraxian standards, mostly chemical propellants and crude fusion devices. Their ships were slow, their defenses basic. By all accounts, this should have been a simple operation. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept their submission into the Empire. Standard procedure. So why did his scales itch with warning? Back on Earth, Cooper had finally managed to restore order to the UN chamber. The shouting had died down to a tense murmur, but the anger and fear in the room remained palpable. He could see it in their eyes, the desperate need to understand why he was supposedly abandoning them to their fate. "I understand your fears," he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "I understand that what I'm asking seems like madness. But I want you to consider something. The Caraxians have spent months studying us, learning about our military capabilities, our technologies, our tactics. But they've missed something crucial, something hiding in plain sight." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. They've been so focused on our weapons that they failed to notice our greatest deterrent, an advantage we've developed not through military might, but through an accident of evolution and the unique conditions of our world. In the audience, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Earth's leading xenobiologist, felt her breath catch as realization began to dawn. She had spent years studying the biological differences between humans and other known spacefaring species. Now, finally, she understood why Cooper had been so interested in her research on human endurance capabilities. In orbit, Theron was becoming increasingly agitated. His fleet had expected a swift surrender following a show of force or a glorious battle ending in victory. This passive resistance was psychologically unnerving his crews. Warning indicators began flashing across his command console. "Sir?" Cax called out, his voice tight with concern. "We're detecting unusual biological readings from the planet's surface. The human population, their vital signs are changing." "Explain," Theron demanded, moving quickly to the sensor station. "Odd rates are elevating uniformly across the population. Body temperatures are rising. Their endocrine systems are showing massive spikes in adrenaline and other compounds we can't identify. But they're still not moving to attack. They're just waiting." Voss leaned over the sensor display, his own heart rate increasing as he studied the readings. "Oh, these biological patterns, they're similar to ancient predator species from our homeworld, but the energy efficiency is unlike anything I've ever seen." Koopa's voice continued to broadcast to both Earth and the Caraxian fleet. "You see, in all their studies of humanity, our would-be conquerors never bothered to ask one simple question. Why did evolution give humans such remarkable endurance? Why did we develop the ability to regulate our temperature through sweating? Why can we keep running long after any other animal would have collapsed?" In his private quarters aboard the Eternal Dawn, fleet biologist Marin frantically reviewed his species' research on human physiology. How had they missed this? They had focused entirely on humanity's technological capabilities, dismissing their biological traits as irrelevant to modern warfare. Now, as he watched the readings from the planet's surface, he felt a primal fear take root in his gut. Theron felt his scales crawl as he listened. Something about Cooper's tone sent primitive warning signals shooting through his brain. It reminded him of stories from his species' prehistoric past, of ancient creatures that hunted not through strength or speed, but through relentless pursuit. "The answer is simple," Cooper said, his voice taking on an almost predatory quality. "We evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't need to be the strongest or the fastest. We just needed to keep going until our prey couldn't run anymore. We would track animals until they collapsed from exhaustion, following them for days if necessary. We are living proof that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the ability to kill quickly, it's the ability to never stop. In orbit, Cax's voice had taken on a note of panic. "Sir, the humans' core temperatures continue to rise, but they're showing no signs of distress. Their muscle density is increasing. Their blood oxygen levels are climbing far beyond normal parameters. Every biological reading we have suggests they should be experiencing severe physical stress, but they appear to be adapting to it, almost embracing it." Dr. Mitchell stood up in the UN chamber, her voice carrying clearly as she added to Cooper's explanation. "What the Admiral is saying is true. Humans are unique among known species in our capacity for endurance. We can maintain pursuit for days while operating on minimal rest. Our bodies can adapt to almost any environment. We are, in biological terms, the perfect pursuit predator." Theron's tactical training screamed at him to open fire, to end this situation before whatever was happening could fully develop. But his orders were clear: no hostile action unless the humans initiated combat. And technically, they were still complying with the surrender demand. "You're watching it happen right now," Cooper continued, his skin now noticeably flushed with heat. "Our bodies are preparing for what we do best. We're not going to fight you. No, we're going to hunt you. Not for hours, not for days, but for as long as it takes. We will follow your ships across the galaxy if necessary. We will never tire. We will never stop. Eventually, you will have to sleep. You will have to rest. We won't." The first reports of system failures began coming in from ships across the Coraxian fleet. Environmental controls were struggling to handle the excess heat being generated by their crews. The stress of the situation was causing their cold-blooded biology to work against them, burning through energy reserves at an alarming rate. "Sir," Voss reported, his own scales now showing signs of stress darkening, "the humans are broadcasting their intent to pursue us across every frequency. They're transmitting detailed biological data showing their capacity for extended pursuit. The psychological impact on our crews, they're beginning to crack." In the UN chamber, General Chen stepped forward to join Cooper at the podium. "For the past decade," he announced, "we have been preparing for this moment. Every military exercise, every space mission, every technological development has been building toward a single capability: the ability to pursue any threat across interstellar distances. Not to fight them, not to destroy them, but to hunt them down through sheer, relentless endurance." Cooper's voice had taken on an almost hypnotic rhythm. "We've spent the last century preparing for this moment, selectively breeding for our natural endurance advantages. Every human on Earth now carries these enhanced traits. We can maintain pursuit for weeks without rest. Our bodies will burn fat reserves while maintaining peak muscle performance. We can process any organic matter for energy. And we've installed pursuit craft in every home, every basement, every building on Earth. Billions of ships, each carrying a human hunter who will never tire, never give up, never stop, until they run their prey to exhaustion." Theron watched in horror as the surface of Earth seemed to ripple, hidden hangar doors opening in every city, every town, every village across the planet. Small, efficient craft began rising into the sky, not weapons platforms, but pursuit vessels stripped down to nothing but engines and life support. Billions of them, each carrying a single human whose biological readings were now off the charts. "This isn't a war," Cooper declared, his eyes now gleaming with an almost feral light. "This is a hunt. You can run. In fact, we want you to run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Push yourselves to your limits, because that's when we do our best work. That's when we're truly in our element. We'll be right behind you, just far enough back that you think you might escape, until your crews start making mistakes from exhaustion, until your ships start breaking down from the strain of sustained maximum acceleration, until you simply can't go any further." Panic began spreading through the Coraxian fleet. Ships started breaking formation, their crews' instincts overwhelming their training. The humans weren't fighting back. They were promising something far worse. They were promising to turn an entire galaxy into an endless chase with no hope of escape or rest. Fleet biologist Marin burst onto the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, his scales pale with fear. "Supreme Commander, you don't understand what we're dealing with. These humans, their endurance capabilities aren't just unusual. They're terrifying. They evolved on a death world, chasing prey until it died of exhaustion. Their bodies are designed for sustained pursuit. They can repair themselves while moving. They can go without sleep for days. They're the perfect hunting machine." "Supreme Commander," Voss pleaded, we have to withdraw. Our psychological profiles never prepared us for this. The crews can't handle the stress of being prey." Theron looked at his tactical display, watching as more and more ships broke formation. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had weaponized their own evolutionary history. They had transformed their entire species into the ultimate psychological weapon, not through technology or firepower, but through the simple promise that they would never stop hunting. "Al-Shinim, emergency withdrawal," Theron ordered, his own voice shaking. Maximum speed to exit the system. Maintain acceleration as long as possible." As the Carrickson fleet fled in disarray, Cooper allowed himself a small smile. The greatest deterrent in human history hadn't been their weapons or their technology. It had been their evolutionary heritage as persistence hunters, combined with humanity's gift for psychological warfare. They had turned their own primitive past into a weapon that no species could stand against, the promise of endless, relentless pursuit. In the days that followed, the Caraxian Empire would learn that humanity had told the truth. Pursuit craft maintained contact with their fleeing ships, always staying just within sensor range, never attacking, never closing to weapons range, just following, waiting. The psychological damage to the Caraxian crews was devastating. Several ships had to be abandoned after their crews became completely non-functional from stress and exhaustion. Back on Earth, Dr. Mitchell worked with military strategists to refine their understanding of the psychological impact their pursuit was having on the Caraxian forces. "It's fascinating," she reported to Cooper. "Their biology literally cannot handle the stress of being endlessly pursued. Their fight-or-flight response was never meant to be sustained for so long. We're not just defeating them, we're breaking them on a fundamental level." 1 month later, the Caraxian Empire surrendered unconditionally. They hadn't lost a single ship to enemy fire. They hadn't faced a superior technology or overwhelming force. They had simply been unable to cope with being turned from predator to prey, with the psychological torture of being endlessly pursued by creatures that never tired, never slept, never gave up. Humanity had unveiled its ultimate weapon, itself. And the galaxy would never be the same. Ha! As Cooper sat in his office, reading the final surrender document, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humans had spent millennia trying to overcome their primitive origins, trying to distance themselves from their evolutionary past. In the end, it had been that very past, their history as persistence hunters, that had saved them from alien conquest. General Chen entered the office, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of scotch. "To the most peculiar victory in military history," he said, pouring them each a drink. "We didn't fire a single shot." "We didn't need to," Cooper replied, accepting the glass. "We just had to remind them, and ourselves, of what we really are. Not soldiers, not warriors, but hunters. The most patient and persistent hunters the galaxy has ever seen." The weapon had been hiding in plain sight all along, written in their DNA, waiting for the moment when humanity would embrace its true nature, not as warriors, but as hunters. The stars had trembled not at their weapons, but at their willingness to chase their prey to the ends of the universe. The day humanity chose not to fight back was the day they truly became dangerous, because sometimes the most terrifying weapon isn't the ability to destroy. It's the promise to never stop pursuing, never stop hunting, never stop running. After all, that's what humans had evolved to do. And they were very, very good at it. Later that night, as Cooper stood at his office window looking up at the stars, he thought about the message they had sent to the galaxy. It wasn't about military might or technological superiority. It was about the primal fear that lived in the hearts of all living things, the fear of being pursued endlessly, relentlessly, by something that would never give up, never grow tired, never stop until it caught you. Humanity had turned that fear into their shield, their deterrent against any future aggression. They hadn't needed to become the strongest species in the galaxy. They had simply needed to become the most persistent. And in doing so, they had ensured that no species would ever again mistake their reluctance to fight for weakness. Because now, they all knew the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one that kills you quickly. It's the one that never stops hunting you down.